good to see you. We miss seeing everybody at our monthly meetings. This is Ingrid Bond. I'm the president of the Bayou Blue Club, and I welcome you to our second virtual meeting. Thank you for tuning in. I've got just a couple of announcements that I'd like to make before we get on with our program. I hope, first of all, that all of you out there are doing well and bearing up under these severely unusual circumstances. My best wishes to all of you. So even though we are a little sidelined with the shutdown of various things, we are still having a few events. You can learn more about them on our website or Facebook page, but I just want to mention that we're doing virtual phone banking for vote by mail in House District 134. That's Ann Johnson's seat. We're trying to make sure that all seniors eligible to vote by mail receive a ballot. That's what this phone bank is about, and Robert Hallenbach on our board is heading up that effort. We also are looking for two precinct chairs in our Bayou Blue Club area. Precinct 123, which is around Spur 527 and the Southwest Freeway, and Precinct 200, which is around Shepherd and West Gray. If you are an active Democrat and are interested in doing this, please look at the Harris County Democratic Party website or get in touch with me or anyone on our Bayou Blue board. We'd love to talk to you a little bit more about that. We also are participating with several other clubs in a debate series. You can find that information also with Harris County Democratic Party website or our website. The next debate is tomorrow night, May 14th, which House District 148 candidates will be speaking. On May 21st, there's the State Board of Education Position 6 debate. May 26th is the Railroad Commission. And May 28th is the Senate candidate debate. So those are all sponsored by several of our area Democratic clubs. We are always looking for new members and renewals. So if you are inclined and are not already a member, please look at our Facebook page and you'll see it's very easy for $20 to buy 1 year's membership. And after you become a member, please don't forget to renew. We have lots of great new members this year, but we have a lot of people who haven't renewed from last year. So we ask you to think about doing that. If you can come up with that $20, it really helps us to pay for events for our club, such as block walking materials, yard signs, printing and postage, and so forth. All right, thank you. And I'd like to now get on with our program for tonight. We have two expert speakers, one more on the city side, one for the state view. And I'm going to start by introducing our new at-large council member for position 5. Sallie Alcorn was elected in December 2019. Prior to running for office, Sallie was a City Hall staffer. She spent the last 10 years serving 3 different council members and on the city's flood recovery office. She has worked in the housing department and has strong experiences in the trenches working on a broad range of issues. Sallie participates in many different community volunteer positions, and she has a bachelor's degree in finance from UT Austin and a master's in public administration from University of Houston. Sallie has been married to her husband George for 32 years, and if you saw her on the campaign trail, you met George. She's the mom of 4 terrific kids, all in their 20s, and she's dying for one of them to get married and give her a grandchild. Sallie is going to update us on the effects of the COVID-19 on City of Houston, especially with regards to the new budget that Sylvester Turner just unveiled yesterday. And without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Sallie.
Thank you very much, Ingrid, and great to be back at Bayou Blue Democrats. Oh my gosh, I miss you guys. I mean, I thought I'd still be going to those meetings and standing in that line and talking to everybody. I can't believe I miss all that stuff, but I really miss all that stuff. So great to be back, and thanks so much for inviting me to come talk, and thank you for all the support that so many of your members gave me during the campaign. And it's just great to be here with Elisa and Ingrid and Raj. And anyway, it's old home week for me, and really miss the campaign vibe, and didn't expect to be elected and then be talking about COVID-19. That was not on one of my flashcards. I made a bunch of flashcards when I ran for office, and with every possible city issue on it, and pandemic was not one of them. So this has been a wild start to my term, but it's also very wonderful, and I'm thrilled and grateful to be here. So I'll just get started. If you want to pull up the slides, I'm just going to run through. There's my cute logo with the blue tiles. Okay, everybody's used to seeing this. This is the health dashboard that comes across on the Harris County website. The Houston numbers are confirmed on there. As you can see, we're on COVID-19. We're getting up to almost 5,000 cases. And I think today the mayor announced it was about 104 fatalities due to COVID-19. So definitely, every case is something to be serious about. Every death is certainly something to be worried about. But if you'll go to the next slide, you can see we are faring much, much better than other large cities. New York, obviously the biggest hot spot. You see Chicago there, Miami, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Houston. Out of all these, New Orleans is on there, LA. I mean, I think, I laugh with people. I'm like, I ran kind of against sprawl, but it seems like sprawl has helped us somewhat in this, that we're not all crammed together in Houston. We're a big 640 square mile city. So that's helped. I think also closing down the rodeo, doing things really proactively at the very beginning has helped us, and everybody just continuing to social distance and wear face coverings and all of that has helped us. Now, we're not going to take our foot off the gas. We're going to keep really, really being vigilant about all of this. But this chart really shows how much better Houston is doing than so many other large cities. Certainly, New York and Chicago and LA are we're number 4 right after them. So you can see we're doing a lot better. And we have this incredible medical center and so many hospitals that are great. And we have never run into a situation where we were going to, be talking about who gets the ventilator and who gets the bed. And so we've been really lucky in this. And like I said, no case is not to be taken seriously, and we don't want any deaths. But comparatively speaking, we've done okay. Okay, you can go on. So one of the things you'll hear a lot about now on the city side, and City Health Director Stephen Williams spoke today about a big virtual job fair. If you know people looking for a job, even temporary, and there are a jillion people looking for a job, including 2 in my own household. 2 out of my 4 kids have been, one was laid off, one was furloughed. So their, job opportunities are at a premium right now, but they're looking for contact tracers. We're going to really beef up that program within the city. They're going to hire about 300 people. If you go on the Houston Health Department website, you can see about their virtual job fair that's coming up. They have about 125 people supporting contact tracing right now. But this is going to be our focus right now: testing and contact tracing. That goes right along with reopening Houston's economy as safely as we can. I'll go into a little bit more about the budget in a minute, and increasing our testing volume and sites. The rental assistance program I'll talk about in a minute. And then Dr. Carolyn Shabazz today, the District D Council member, said we've all become, she called it a mask ministry. We've been distributing masks all over town, and that's really masks and food, and I love the mask ministry, because that's really what it's all about, just getting people out there. If you are going to be opening even somewhat, everybody needs to be wearing a mask. Just personally, everybody's heard about Dr. Plummer, my former opponent, but now one of my dearest friends. It's funny how that happens. I always tell her that the best day of my campaign was the day she switched to the at-large 4 race. But anyway, she sits right next to me, and in the horseshoe, and then we've been moved. We call it the kids table. Some of the newer council members have been moved off of the horseshoe for social distancing, but she still sits right next to me, and we talk quite a bit. So, you know, I of course got tested on, I guess, Monday when I found out about her, and I got the results, which were negative today. And I'll be quarantining until May 20th because the CDC guidelines state that 14 days after you are in contact with a known positive COVID case, you need to quarantine for 14 days. So I'll be staying in. But just, you know, on a personal note, you know, it's scary. I mean, it's scary, and she was sick. She's on the mend though, and doing better. And also, you know, just to put this in real personal terms, like I told you, 2 kids. I've got one in New York. She's actually gone with a friend to Ocean City, New Jersey to kind of camp out and get out of the city. But her 25% of her company was laid off. My daughter here was working selling ads for a sports radio station. So needless to say, she's furloughed because there are no sports, or certainly nobody who wants to buy ads. My husband is a petroleum geologist, and you just can look at the oil prices. So it's very real to the Alcorn family, and very real to so many families across Houston. This is going to have big economic implications for a lot of families, and my thoughts and prayers go to everyone who's being affected by this pandemic. You can go on to the next one. These are some economic impact facts that GHP put together. I think we're probably very much at about 400,000 unemployment claims, and that might even be low for Houston. This purchasing index is kind of shocking. I mean, people just aren't buying, businesses aren't buying, construction rates have decreased. You can go on to the next. You can see what's happening to the commercial real estate market. I mean, so many people telecommuting, that might have longer term implications. New listings are down, vacancy rates rising, home builders are way below their capacity. Small businesses, I mean, the county put up that $15 million program, which was like sold out in hours. And, you know, many people have been left out of the PPP federal stimulus loans. So, you know, the economic impact, especially exacerbated by Houston being the energy capital of the world, it will be felt. So this is going to be, in addition to the health concerns that COVID is bringing, it's bringing a whole slew of economic concerns as well. Next slide, please. So yesterday, the mayor released the city budget. And today we had our first budget hearing with the finance director. And I'm a big budget geek at City Hall. This is my favorite time of year. It's like Christmas. And I can't believe I'm quarantined. I had to do it all virtually, but that's okay. It was even more fun to fire off all my questions on the computer today. And I asked a million of them. But our overall operating budget is $5.1 billion. I know this will get real in the weeds. I'll try to make it interesting. The tax supported budget, the part that your property taxes and sales tax, that's about half of the budget. That's $2.6 billion. The rest is like airports and water and wastewater that you pay for on your water bill. It's kind of like they support themselves, but the tax supported budget is $2.6 billion. And of that $2.6 billion, nearly 60% is public safety. And in the public safety departments, about 90% of their budgets are personnel. So we've got a tight and difficult budget. There's about $107 million sales tax revenue, both in this fiscal year. Our fiscal year starts July 1. That's why we're doing the budget now. But basically, about a little over $100 million worth of lost sales tax revenue over this year and next. So we'll have we expect about $675 million in sales tax in fiscal year 2021. So it's a big hit. That's a big portion of sales tax. So anyway, that's going to have an impact. And obviously that created a big shortfall in our budget. That the loss in sales tax revenue, plus just the structural imbalances, the property tax cap that we have, so many things that year over year we are spending more than we bring in. So we have a big budget shortfall, about $170 million. The mayor is talking about raising new revenue through digital signage. No details on that. Very controversial. I'm not sure if I'm even a fan all the way, but we've been given very little to go on the digital billboards. He did say today we might be able to take down 3 standard billboards in order to put up 1 digital one. I think looking at every revenue source is, of course, what we need to be doing. So look forward to hearing more about that. Today, we did pass a $4.5 million garbage container lease fee, $1.14 a month for your garbage container. There was a lot of discussion at council about that. It won by a few votes. There were a lot of no votes on that too. And we're drawing down something I hate, but we have to do this year, is drawing down our general fund reserve balance. It's something we do every year to balance the budget. I wish we didn't, because then we'd have more reserves to cover unexpected things like COVID. And basically within that $98, there's $15 million of our $20 million rainy day fund included, and we have already taken out $5 million. Our rainy day fund is $20 million. We've taken out 5 for COVID. We're drawing down 15 to fill this budget gap. So we have a big fat 0 in our rainy day fund. And guess what's coming? Hurricane season. So this will keep me up at night. And I'm sure a lot of people up at night, because we really needed those funds when Harvey came a few years back. Okay, move on. The mayor's deferring 5 of the police cadet classes. That would have been $14 million. The zoo payment, we give the zoo around $10 million every year. And we have determined that the CARES Act can cover that funding. So that kind of frees up $10 million. There will also be a furlough of about 3,000 city employees, not police, not fire, not solid waste. That's what the mayor has said. And that will save about $7 million. You can see the CARES Act funding. We know that $200 million is going to go to contact tracing and testing. We did the $15 million in rent relief, another $10 million to the zoo. So we'll have roughly about $180 million left, and a lot of debate on what that can be spent on. There's guidance from the U.S. Treasury. There's debate on what can it be spent on regular. It's basically if you've been a substantially involved payroll that's been substantially involved in COVID. So questions about how much of our police or fire, lots of fire department, obviously money will go to that, but there's debate. I'm asking every day, like, when will we know more about how we can spend that money? Because that will have a direct impact on our budget. And then it's a tough municipal budget, and that's my big plug for my Your 2 Cents program. So you can go to the next slide. During the campaign, one of my campaign things on my website, you can go, I called it my 2 cents, but I changed it to Your 2 Cents because it flowed better. But I have always been, being down at City Hall for so long, I have always just really been discouraged about the lack of public participation in the city budget process. Other cities have robust public engagement in the budget. This is the most important thing we do as council members. This is it. This is where we have the biggest impact on the budget. And there's just really little, there's budget workshops that are held during the day that nobody can come to. There's one guy from A-Leave, Doug Smith, he comes to every single one. He's like our one public participant. So one of the things I really wanted to do when I was running, and now that I'm in, is increase the public participation in the budget. So as a council member, you're limited in what you can do. So I just said, I'm going to do a survey. So I've got a really simple survey. I launched it a few weeks ago. I've gotten over 1,000 responses, over 50 zip codes. No big surprises here on what people want to prioritize. I asked 2 questions. What are your top 3 priorities and what are your bottom 3 priorities? And then I give you a menu list. And the top 3 are public safety, 61%, Houston Public Works, basically infrastructure, 42%, and then solid waste, 39%. The bottom ones keep changing, so I don't have the bottom ones on those, but I'll be releasing those soon. I encourage everybody who's listening to please take the survey. It's on my website. There's the link. I mean, it's not really a link, but there's the URL right there. And I love getting them. There's also a comment space, so I'm like staying up at night reading comments. It's so great to hear from people. It's your tax dollars. I mean, you should have a say in how they're spent. And I know that the categories are broad and everything, but the comments let you be a little more nuanced in what you'd like to see. So I'm grateful for that, and hopefully this will become a bigger thing, and I'd like to have public hearings in different areas of town on the budget in years to come. But here's a start on public participation in the budget. So please do it. Okay, you can go to the next one. The rental assistance program. So Councilmember Plummer, Councilmember Thomas, and I really, and there are others, but we really started from the very beginning of COVID talking about rental assistance, because the city of Houston is a city of renters. I mean, we're 58% rentals, people rent. So I think it's maybe because my own daughters that were getting laid off, like, how are we going to pay our rent? That it really hit home to me, like, wow, nobody's going to be able to pay their rent. So we met with the mayor, we started pounding on the table, we did everything we could to try to get, and we had a lot of advocates from the community, TMO and others were really in there, the AFL-CIO, Texas Housers, really in there advocating for rental assistance. Well, let me tell you what happened. About 7,000 properties signed up last week, and this morning at 10 a.m., they opened up the portal for tenants, and like it was completely like chaos because the site couldn't keep up with the number of people on it. It wasn't that it was crashing, it was just slow, but then it kind of, after about 45 minutes, it got a little bit better. But needless to say, in 85 minutes, all $15 million was committed, or people had been pre-qualified. So that is just a rude awakening and a real eye-opener on what the need is in our city. It's going to be, I can't imagine anything more scary than not knowing if you can pay the rent to keep your family in a place. And that's very real. We are all writing our congressional delegation. There is talk, I heard Sheila Jackson Lee talk at the mayor's press conference today about an additional bill that could be for rent relief. We all need to advocate for that. This $15 million we all knew would never be enough. We were thrilled to get something going, but it's not nearly enough. And so many people were not able to even access it. So this will continue to be a big push of mine. Anyway, rent relief, gotta have it. You can go on, I think, and now just testing. You know, we're really doing, let me tell you about my testing experience. You know, you hear all these lines and what's going on. I mean, I literally picked up the phone, I called that number right there. I said, I'm Sallie Alcorn. I was exposed to a case. She asked some other questions, which took about 1 minute. She gave me a number. You write the number on a piece of paper. You put the piece of paper on your windshield. George and I drove over to Del Mar Stadium. I was the only I think I went late in the day. I hear they're busier in the morning, but I was the only car and about 20 million cones. It's like being at Astroworld waiting in the lines. You're going up and down the cones, but we were the only people there. And, you know, literally you get the thing, you do it yourself at the city, and you do the swab in your nose and you put it in a vial and you put it in a box. Nobody touches anything, or you don't, you know, have any contact with anybody. And that's that. And I did that, I want to say Monday about 4 o'clock. and I got my results today, Wednesday morning. So literally less than 2 days, and it was easy peasy. But what we're really trying to do, what Marvin Odom, the city's recovery or COVID, he was the flood recovery guy, now he's the COVID recovery guy, great guy, is we're really doing this kind of precision testing. And in communities where we know this is hitting nursing homes and assisted living and under-resourced neighborhoods and multi-generational families. So we're going to those neighborhoods and doing the testing. And then we're doing contact tracing from there. So it's precision. If we're going to start opening, we have to use our scalpel and get at this very strategically. And then I think then the last slide is just another something about mobile testing. So anyway, just thanks, guys. I mean, stay vigilant, and this too shall pass, as we all say, but and stay engaged in the city budget. And anyway, great to be here, and the end.
Well, Sallie, thank you so much. I think we are so fortunate to have you representing us there on City Council, because your knowledge and your passion and your just very structured thinking comes through clearly. And I appreciate all the work you did in putting that presentation together. Those numbers are, some of them, very daunting, but at least it does outline what we are facing and lets us know. And I do hope, I know Eliza put in the little comment box the link to your survey, so I hope everybody who's out there tuning
in, survey.
Take the survey.
And they're very interested in it too, so I can't wait to give them all my survey responses.
We'll publicize it on our webpage and Facebook too, and hopefully get some good answers. I know you've already got good response. And so I also wanted to just mention, I neglected when we first started to say that in this presentation mode, everybody who's watching can submit questions. And so I'm about to introduce Mike Collier, our next speaker, but after that, all the questions that are submitted are going to be discussed in a panel with Raj Sahotra and our two speakers. So just make sure anything that comes to mind, please submit your questions in that chat box, or the Q&A box, I believe it is. So without any further ado, now that we're informed of the local issues, we've got an expert in state matters, a career-long CPA who got so mad in 2011 about the education cuts and the funding slaughter that occurred in the state legislature. He ran for the comptroller in 2014. He won the Democratic nomination, but not the final election. He's been really active as different positions. He was the Texas Democratic Party finance chair. He ran in 2018 against Dan Patrick, coming up only 5% short. Darn it. We'd be in so much better shape now if that wasn't the case. And even though the coronavirus is keeping us all from our 100% activity, Mike is pretty busy. He's on Joe Biden's National Finance Committee. He's on his Biden's Texas Leadership Committee, and he's serving as Royce West's Assistant Treasurer. He's part of the 2020 Democratic Platform Working Group, and he writes, tweets, and talks about the Texas budget, and particularly about Texas education, and he has a full-time job in Texas as a CPA. So Mike, I know you've got a lot of good insight, and without further ado, I will turn it over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Thank you. Very good. We are in business now.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Ingrid. That's a very wonderful introduction. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm delighted to be here. I'd rather be with you in person. That is practical. I just want you to know I'm doing everything I'm supposed to, staying in the house most of the time. I wear my mask everywhere I go. I'm sad to report I get funny looks from people who are defiantly not doing the right thing. That's going to come back to haunt us. But and I just want you to know my wife cut my hair. She's never cut hair before, but she cut it for the first time yesterday, and I just couldn't be happier. So, Sallie, I really enjoyed your remarks, if you can hear me. Thanks so much. Very informative. I think that we're doing everything right, all that we can anyway. What I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about what the financial implications are of COVID to the Texas state budget. I've prepared some numbers, and they're fairly high level numbers, but what I'd like to do is walk you through kind of what the budget looks like. This is the state budget, what it looks like, where's the money come from, where does the money go, what did the legislature do in the last session? They played a shell game, they put money into public education, so I'm going to show you, but they didn't come up with new revenues. It's a rob Peter to pay Paul situation, which means that we'd be headed for trouble in the next legislative session were it not for COVID. And with COVID, I think we're going to have a very, very difficult time. And then I'll end by sharing with you what I think the right answer is. So let me see if I can't share a slide with you. Ingrid, can folks see that? I hope everybody can see it. If you can't see it, I'll be interrupted. The looming Texas budget disaster. Let's start by just sort of level setting. Where does our money come from in the sales tax is the biggest number. If you look at the middle column, that's the budget year that we're in. If you look at the first column you come to, that was the last budget, and you can see the percent change. So state gets most of its revenues from sales tax. In the budget that we're in, $66.3 billion. What I want to say about that is it's not holding up in COVID. And Comptroller Hager just told us that it's probably 5% down. It could get worse. So right off the bat, I think we're in trouble when our number one revenue generator is producing less revenues. I also want you to look over to the right where I see the percent change. I want to show you something. And this is a consistent theme with Mike Collier versus the Republicans. Look at that sales tax increase from budget cycle to budget cycle, 9.6%. If it only went up equal to population plus inflation, it would have only gone up about 7.5%. Guess who's taking it on the chin in Texas? We always take it on the chin. Property taxes is a big issue too. You'll note that there aren't any property taxes here because the state doesn't collect any property taxes. That's all collected locally. Oil and gas is a very big revenue source. In the budget year that we're in, 10.7 billion. Of course, you can see that it was up 10.5%, almost 10.5%. That's no surprise, but it's crashing. That number is going to come down very hard. A lot of that money goes to the rainy day fund. A lot of that money goes to the highway fund. So it won't have an immediate impact on our general revenues, but to some extent, it does impact general revenues, and that's going down. Next line, franchise tax, otherwise known as the margin tax, otherwise known as the incredible shrinking corporate tax, 6 billion. Look how much that changed period to period. It's only up 3.5%. Now, who do you think's getting a really good deal in the state? It's not us. And that's Mike Collier versus the Republicans. I always get asked about lottery. There's the lottery number. It's small. That's why it doesn't come up so often. It's less than 3 billion. I mean, 3 billion is a lot of money, but it's relative to the others. There's your lottery money. Lots of things in other, such as hotel occupancy and automobile sales and rental and insurance and tobacco and the rest. And then you can see we get a fair amount of money from the federal government, and then there's all sorts of other funds, including highway funds. I want to go to the next slide and show you how we spend our money. Now, before we do, I'm going to try something. I'm going to hop out, stop showing. I want to share with you a thought process before we get into these numbers. And you'll hear Dan Patrick and the other Republicans talk about how population plus inflation, we shouldn't spend any more than population plus inflation. Woe unto us if we ever increase our budget any more than population plus inflation. I get it. But when they put a bunch of money into public education, which we fought hard for, and that's good, I asked the question, where did that money come from? Now I want to show you where it came from. So we hope you can see it. This is how we're spending our money. The first column is the actual budget that we're in. The second column is what should it have been to keep up with population and inflation. And the third column is, did they put in more or did they put in less to keep up with population plus inflation? So the first thing you see is the public education line. You can see that they budgeted 67.7. Population and inflation suggested they only needed to budget 65.2, which means that they actually did better in public education. And we know that. The number that they throw around is 11.5 billion. Of the 11.5 billion, about 5 of that is property tax relief, doesn't go to schools. Another 4.5 billion is just enrollment growth. The excess over enrollment growth, 2.5 billion. So that's good. We fought hard for more money for public education, but look where it came from. Look at the next line. Health and Human Services, that should be services. Look what they did. They budgeted 84.4 billion, but just to keep up, they needed to budget 90. That's where the money came from for public education. They under budgeted to the tune of 5.7. Same thing for business and economic development. That's highways. Right down the line. And you can see that total in the bottom. Now, when I did this calculation, when I was asking myself, where in the world did the money come from to increase public education? So I did this analysis, and when I hit calc and I saw that they under budgeted in total by $5 billion, I thought, eureka. Remember, Abbott said he wanted to increase sales taxes by $5 billion. Do you remember that? He wanted to throw that problem onto our backs. Sales tax is so unfair to the poor. It's the wrong answer. Now I want to say something else. Now rerun these numbers, and for Health and Human Services, a lot of that is Medicaid. Instead of increasing that at a normal inflation rate, if you increase that at a healthcare inflation rate, because healthcare costs are going up much faster than other costs, rerun the numbers, they didn't under budget to the tune of 5 billion. You can see that they under budgeted by my calculation to the tune of 10 billion. And as you can see, this hole that we've got where we've under budgeted of 10 billion, this is before COVID. This is huge. Now I'm going to step out of this if I can. Now I want to explain something. So the question is, and here's where the rubber hits the road, because what I want to talk to you about is how's the legislature going to deal with this in the next session? If they have under budgeted these things, what happens? Do you just stop? Do you run out of money? Well, what they do, yes, they do run out of money. When they under budget, as they've done, they run out of money before we get to the end of the budget cycle. But they run out of money right about the time the legislature meets in January. They still have about 8 months left in the budget to go. So they could be completely out of money. The first thing the legislature does is take next year's revenues and fill that hole, and they do that in January. It's called a supplemental appropriation. And so what that means is that those chickens are going to come home to roost, and they're going to come home to roost in January. I want to say something else. Comptroller Hager said that he's going to give us an update as to our revenues, taking into consideration coronavirus, sometime in June or July. Now, here's what he's going to tell us, I predict. He's going to say, well, times are tough, but before COVID, times were really, really good. And taken together, we'll have to tighten our belts and we'll have to be conservative, but we'll get through it. And he wants everyone to relax and feel like everything is fine. And then there's going to be an election. And he's hoping that Democrats don't take over the House, and they're going to deliberately put people to sleep. And as soon as the election is over, then they're going to say, oh, Lord, we've run out of money. That's what's coming. Now, I want to come back and show you one more slide. See if I can do this right. It's my last slide. Let's go back and look at what happened in the last recession, because that's telling us what's going to happen in this next recession. So in the last recession, they did exactly what I'm describing now. They said they under budgeted. You know, the cuts to public education didn't happen until 2012, but the recession was 2008, 2009. So what they did was they sailed through the recession telling everybody things are fine, things are fine. And then there was an election. That's when Bill White ran against Rick Perry. Everything was fine. Rick Perry won. And then they said, oh, Lord, we don't have enough money. And these were the numbers. These are exactly the numbers coming out of the last recession. And the comptroller puts these numbers together. This was Susan Combs at the time. She said the revenues available to the legislature, that's the top line, will be 76.5 billion. Of course, we're bigger now, but that's what the number was then. However, we've run out of money. Negative balance from the previous budget, negative 4.3. Y'all only have 72.2 to spend. And what did they do? They turned around and they cut public education by $5.4 billion. A delayed reaction, which is exactly what we're stepping into. And by the way, that $5.4 billion budget cut and the games that they played with that budget to do it is precisely why yours truly got involved in politics. And I'm not going to stop, because they're not going to do it again. They're going to try, but they're not going to do it again, because we aren't going to let them. Now, let me just say one last couple of things. I'm back. First of all, I would invite you to go to my webpage, Collier for Texas, and Facebook page. We, from time to time, do a Facebook Live to talk about the budget, and we have time then to go into a lot more detail. And so you'll see we've done two now. One is a much deeper dive into what I just showed you. That's recorded and that's there. The second one that we did, which was last weekend, was related to teacher funding and pensions. So go have a look at that. Something I know you're thinking is, Mike, what about the rainy day fund? That's next. We're going to talk about that a week from Saturday. So I would invite you to come to my Facebook page, where I'm doing these Facebook live town halls, to dig into these numbers, because I want to make sure that everybody understands how important this election is in November. So important. Now, here's where I want to close. With a hole that we're digging, by my calculation, $10 billion, even before COVID. Now, how in the world are we going to dig out of this? And Sallie, Councilwoman Alcorn was just telling us the same thing. How are we going to dig ourselves out of this? Well, we're going to have to come up with more money somehow. Now, where's that money going to come from? Higher property taxes? No, we're already taxed too high, and it isn't fair. More sales taxes? Can't do it. Income tax? We don't have one. Where's it going to come from? Out of the sky? What we need, what every city needs, what every county needs, what our state needs, what every city in the country, every county in the country, every state in America needs, is access to a revenue system that's progressive, where you can collect money based on people's income, borrow if you need to get us through that crisis. And that revenue system is available. We have one. It's called the federal government. The federal government. We pay taxes to the federal government. That's our facility available for this purpose. Now, you will hear folks call it, we're bailing out the states. We're bailing out the states. You can't bail out the states. You can't bail out the city. No, sir. That's not what we're talking about. That federal government is ours. We have a system that's available so that we can borrow money as needed, raise taxes to pay that money back. We don't have to recreate anything. It's ours. We own it. And last thing I want to say is that's why the election in November is so essential. If Republicans control the White House and the Senate, they'll call it a bailout. They'll dig in their heels, and it'll be bad logic. They'll mislead people. We all know what's coming, and they'll do it because they never miss an opportunity to cut teacher pay, to not deal with pensions. Imagine what happens with pensions. They'll cut, and it's going to cost. We're going to have to lay off police and firemen and social workers and sanitation workers and healthcare and child protective services, education, everything that we cherish. More than any other time that I can think of, the election in November matters, and it must be Democrats. We have to flip this state, and then we have to flip the House. We must, which is one of the reasons why I'm very animated, and I'm delighted to be with you. And I hope that we have a chance to answer some questions. I'd love to get into it. But go to collierfortexas.com, sign up, join me on Facebook Live, tell your friends. We've got to organize now. The November election is just under 6 months. And I'm not on the ballot, but I'm in the fight. Okay, thanks. With that, Ingrid, I turn it over to y'all.
Well, thank you, Sallie and Mike. That was great. Want to thank you for spending some time with us. And we did have some questions come in. And again, if you have other questions, you can just type it into the questions box that should be on your screen, and I'll just try to go through them. We have a few for each of y'all, so maybe I'll just go back and forth. Some questions are directed to you, Sallie, some to you, Mike. So let's just jump in. So Sallie, the first question someone had was, will CIP projects be delayed with the proposed budget?
Well, the CIP budget comes later in the summer. This is the operating budget. The CIP is a whole different animal. Of course, they are related. There are operating funds that go towards the CIP, but yeah, I mean, like property tax revenues in the form of the Rebuild Houston, the dedicated drainage and street renewal fund. I mean, if property values go down, the amount transferred from the ad valorem taxes that go towards capital projects will go down. I mean, there will be an impact. The sales tax impact of COVID-19 is immediate. The property tax impact of COVID-19 is about a 2-year lag. So you'll see more of the property tax impact, like when Mayor Parker had all those layoffs, that was in 2011. You know, the recession was more like 2009, right? So that's when it really hit, the property tax stuff hit. But yes, I mean, there will be implications for the CIP, but again, that is a lot of fees that pay for CIP project and a lot of debt that pays for CIP projects. So you shouldn't see a big change in CIP. The biggest change will be in the operating budget.
Let me just, Mike, before coming to you, Sallie, this is a very related question, so I wanted to just ask you right now, which is, someone asks, what is the CIP?
It's the capital improvement plan, and that is those are the projects. It's vertical construction and horizontal construction. It's roads and bridges and drainage projects and buildings and, you know, and vehicles, everything that you would think of with kind of a longer term payout. And like before Rebuild Houston, before the drainage fee came into effect, we used to pay everything with debt. Now we have a pay-as-you-go system. You get the bill on your water bill for your impervious cover that pays for the drainage and a lot of the street projects. And then there's debt for like water and wastewater projects. That's all in that. Capital improvements that are done at the airport, all of that, all the big stuff, the big, like, you know, dig holes and build something, and bricks and mortar, build a building, fix a building. That's all the capital expenditure. The budget I was speaking of earlier, and the budget that we're considering now, is the operating budget. And that's really the tax supported budget that is police, all the stuff you think about city services, police, fire, trash, neighborhood services, you know, all of that.
Perfect. Thank you. Mike, let me come to you. There's a question around, what is the franchise tax?
What is the franchise tax? A franchise tax is a disaster. But in the old days, we had a fairly simple franchise tax that businesses pay. And the theory behind that is that if you own a business and you're making a profit, you benefit from education, you benefit from roads, you benefit from sewer, you benefit from all these things. And so in exchange for the privilege of having a business franchise in the state, you pay a little bit of money. That's the theory. We had a pretty simple franchise tax that ran along without, you know, too much difficulty, complaint, no fist fights, no dog bites for a long, long time. However, in 2006, there was a lawsuit related to school funding. The state wasn't putting enough money into public education. That's a very familiar theme. And the state lost the lawsuit, and the state was mandated to do two things: reduce property taxes and increase the franchise tax so that it would be revenue neutral. Otherwise, you'd have a hard time with school funding. So when they went to increase the franchise tax, they said, well, we're not just going to increase it, we're just going to re-engineer the whole thing and call it a margin tax. And when they did that, nobody understood it. It was incomprehensible. It's kind of an income tax, it's kind of not. It's the most remarkable thing I've ever seen. Our controller back at the time, Carol Keaton Rylander, Strayhorn McClellan, and her economists looked at that new tax and said, guys, and guys is an appropriate use of the term because it's the men that run that Republican Party. She said to them, guys, this thing is improperly designed. There's not enough money. You're actually not increasing anything, which means we're going to have a structural deficit. They ignored her. It was very damaging to her politically, in my opinion. She exited stage left, and she was exactly right. And that was the beginning of all of our difficulties in terms of not having enough revenues in the state and all the problems that we see as it relates to property taxes that are too high, as it relates to the hole that we've just dug and teacher pension and the rest, go back to a botched margin tax, which, now I'll say, is that even though it came up short and created all these difficulties, they nevertheless have reduced it dramatically. I call it the incredible shrinking tax, which has cost us as taxpayers when the property tax, when it comes to sales tax, when it comes to all the things that we discussed. And the folks that own those companies that are getting that tax break are laughing all the way to the bank as they haul our money out of this state. Kind of a pugilist's answer to an otherwise fairly simple accounting question, Raj. I hope you know me.
Yeah, great. Okay.
You know me.
We'll come back to you. Someone asked, where do the funds come from to replace the reserve?
Well, the reserve, we're for the first time, and as long as I can remember, going below our recommend. We're supposed to keep in reserve by the city's financial policies 7.5% of our expenditures less debt service. We usually keep, the mayor's been pretty good, and Mayor Parker too, keeping it above that, 8 or 9% above expenditures less debt. This budget, because of COVID and because of all the disaster, we're going actually below the 7.5%, which could impact our credit rating. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be happening in cities across the country, so who knows if it will. But I think we're going down to like 7.15%. I mean, you replace the reserves with, you know, excess revenue that you don't end up spending, that budgeted revenue that you don't end up spending by the end of the year, any kind of extra. You could, maybe a land sale happens, any judgment that you win, anything extra that was not expected as part of your revenues or less spending, that flows straight to the fund balance. So we really need to build back our fund balance. We're supposed to replace we're just now replacing all our Harvey. We took the $20 million out of the rainy day fund, which is part of our fund balance. It's $20 million of our fund balance. You have to replace that within 2 years. We just replaced it. Now we're yanking it right back out.
Wow. Mike, let's come back to you. We have a question, two questions kind of related. So one is, given this hole that you described, what is the policy proposal that can make up the shortfall? And kind of corresponding question, will Texas use the rainy day fund?
Let me take it in reverse order, if I may, because one is a technical question, technical answer, and then the other one's really a policy answer. Can we use the rainy day fund? Councilwoman Alcorn just mentioned 7.5% of budget is kind of how much you need to keep in reserve is considered. I've heard that as well in the state. Now, they haven't talked about it in a long time. Governor Perry was the last to mention it, but you'll hear them discuss it from time to time. That's a fairly reasonable metric, which means that of the balance of the rainy day fund, which is almost $8 billion now, we would keep, by my calculation, we can't spend any more than 2 of it. We've got to keep $6 billion in reserve, which is about 7.5% of our general revenues, 7.5% of our state revenues. So which means we got to keep 6. Now that's not an official number. That's just the world according to Mike. You can't pry that information out of Hager and Patrick and the rest. But I think the right answer is that we can't. You know, we took about $6 billion out of it to get through Harvey. So I don't think we can use it. So that remains to be seen. Again, the only way to dig ourselves out of this hole, and I've looked at this thing 6 ways from Sunday, other than a miracle. The only way to dig this out of ourselves here are our policy choices. Radically increase the property tax. That won't happen. It's the wrong answer. Radically increase the sales tax. Sorry, not going to do it. Have a new income tax. Nope. Sorry, ain't going to do it. Borrow money. We've already borrowed quite a lot of money. We didn't talk about debt, but the state is deeply in debt. So our only options really are either dramatic cuts to fire and police and teachers and public education, retired teachers and everything else, or do the politically correct and appropriate and conservative thing, which is to partner with the federal government because they have the ability to tax, they have the ability to borrow. You know, I'm a deficit hawk. I don't think you spend money. I don't think you borrow money unless you need to, because then you can't borrow in times of crisis. This is a time of crisis. It's appropriate to borrow. So I think that the federal government is going to have to step in and do right so that we can use the federal government's borrowing capacity, use the Internal Revenue Code. I wish it was a fair code. I hope that Democrats win so that we can make it fair. But I really just don't see any solution other than tapping into the revenue capability of the federal government for each and every state and city and county and everything.
That brings up a follow-up, which I think both Mike, you and Sallie, you guys could both answer this. And the question is, why not take on more debt, given that debt is so cheap right now?
Yeah, so I think our general fund budget is about 14% debt service we pay for debt. We do a really good job, I think, at the city of refinancing. I mean, we save millions and millions of dollars on refinancing debt. And I think with interest rates what they are, we'll see a lot of refinancing options coming our way, and we'll see a lot of that coming up. Taking on more debt, we are not by charter allowed, because of Rebuild Houston, to incur debt for street and drainage infrastructure. So we are on a strictly pay-as-you-go deal there. But and the city every 4 or 5 years comes out with a big bond referendum. I'm not sure where we are in that cycle. It should be in the next, for vertical construction and for other things that we need. We have $900 million worth of deferred maintenance on our city facilities. 900 million. And I asked today, are we setting aside any money for our $900 million? And there's basically no, we don't have it. So it's just going to get worse. So yeah, we do these bond elections, for parks and for vertical construction and for other things. And I'm not sure. It should be coming up in the next couple of years or so that we'll do another big bond issuance. But yeah, I mean, we incur debt on the regular. So and that we just don't do it for street and drainage infrastructure.
Mike?
Yeah, so debt is useful, debt is cheap. However, let me put it to you this way. The biggest problem with public debt is that we never, ever pay it off. All we do is roll it over.
That's right.
Yeah, all we do is roll it over. There's a line in a movie I love: if you can't afford it, finance it, right? The problem is that if you get used to spending more than you make, then you get addicted to debt. And we never, ever pay off public debt. And so those 2% bonds are going to mature. And if they mature into a rising interest rate environment, then all of a sudden we could become completely overwhelmed with debt charges. Point number one. Point number two, we're flirting in Texas with a credit rating downgrade because we are very, very deeply in debt. The sum of all of our debt, the teacher pension plus outstanding bonds, and if you have an interest, the next topic is debt. So come join me on my Facebook Live a week from Saturday. We're going to get into the numbers. It's about 120 billion that we owe. I mean, at some point, if you, as a state, that's bonds plus teacher retirement that's unfunded. At some point, the rating agencies will look at you and say, your credit is not good. Now, all of a sudden, your interest rates move really quite dramatically. And at the federal level, let me share some numbers with you at the federal level. And I am advocating, just to be crystal clear, I support what's happening now to get through this crisis. We are borrowing money. We're printing money to get through this crisis. We have to save jobs. But even before COVID, we were adding $1 trillion of debt a year to our deficit was $1 trillion a year. We had gotten our debt up to 23 trillion, roughly equal to our economy. My expectation is that we will borrow another 10 trillion to get through this. $23 trillion will be 33 or 34 or 35 trillion dollars by the time we're done. And our economy, when it comes back to normal, is only about 20 trillion. So we're reaching the point in the federal government where we owe so much money, we owe 1.5 years of our total economic output. Now, no one knows how high you can take that. No one's ever really tested it with a reserve currency. We have a reserve currency. But woe unto the nation that discovers that they are carrying too much debt. If we ever lost our position as a reserve currency, a crisis like this, we'd be no better able to deal with this than Argentina or Brazil or any of these other countries. And that's why I'm a deficit hawk, because I think that we tend to abuse borrowed money and refuse to pay as you go.
Got it. We have two more questions. So Mike, we'll start with you. This one is a little bit in the weeds. So I'm gonna read it out. Maybe not not that much of the weeds.
Oh.
The questioner, the audience member asks that there was a proposition from about 5 years ago that restricts a portion of the sales tax to road construction.
Right.
And he's wondering if in a time like this, there's a way to defer or use the money for something beyond road construction. Kind of if you're familiar with that at all.
I am. Yeah, it was a constitutional amendment 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. After not the last legislative session, but the legislative session before that. The numbers I recall is $2.5 billion that goes from sales taxes. Don't quote me on that, but as I recall, it was $2.5 billion that could go to highways, into the highway fund. The question is, can we use that to dig ourselves out of this hole? I'm sure that we can. The question is, can we do it absent a constitutional amendment? Because it's there by virtue of a constitutional amendment. Now they tell me, and I've got some spies in the comptroller's office, they tell me that there's all sorts of things that you can do with smoke and mirrors in situations like that. And I don't want to get into that. I'm an auditor, so those kinds of things make me nervous. So it's a wonderful question. I think what we have to do is have a look at that. Plus, for example, also money from the rainy day fund is directed towards highways. Is that wise? I mean, we have to have sort of a crisis mentality and free our minds to make sure that we do the right thing. But I will say this: I can't find 10 or 15 billion. Take all of those things. I can't find 10 or 15 billion. So I just don't see that we can get through this without tapping into that federal facility, which is ours, to avoid layoffs, which would be a disaster.
Got it. Thank you, Mike. And final question, Sallie. Why does the city fix side streets while not fixing major thoroughfares, which need it badly and carry more traffic?
Oh my gosh, that's usually we usually get the opposite question. We usually get, why are you on the major thoroughfares and not in the neighborhoods? So, wow. We honored when Rebuild Houston first started, Mayor Parker honored the 5-year CIP, which was mostly thoroughfares. And really, we started hearing from the neighborhoods so much that, like, you've got to come in our neighborhoods. You're doing everything in the thoroughfares. So then the focus totally shifted to the neighborhoods and less on the thoroughfares. So that's why you're seeing that. So, damned if you do and damned if you don't. I mean, yeah, I get it. There's more traffic and more mobility concerns on the thoroughfares. That is a big deal. And it was always meant to be kind of a mix. And I think we've kind of erred on doing too much of one or the other. But it's a concern, and we're watching that. I do think this year, with some of the debt going down and the street and drainage debt going down, we are going to be transferring more money towards projects this year than we ever have before. So that's a really good thing. We'll get a lot more done.
Well, on behalf of the whole group, let me say thank you. One person wrote, "We have two charismatic budget geeks." I agree more. I'm sure you guys will be happy.
Sallie, here's a high five.
I know it's so hard to make the budget exciting. It really is. But thanks for sticking with us.
I thought you all did a absolutely wonderful job. Thank you so much. And Ingrid and Eliza, I will turn it back to you all to close things out.
Hey, this is Ingrid here. Sorry. We appreciate your attendance and encourage you, if you like what you saw, to follow us on Facebook and become a member or renew your membership if you haven't already. Thank you so much. We'll see you next month.